Dear all, I'm Ole Alvseike and I will briefly present some results from our trials developing the meat factory cell. This presentation has been made in collaboration with Miguel Prieto and Alex Mason. First, let's recap where the work is taking place in the value chain. We start the process from where a scalded, singed and bagged pig carcass enters the meat factory cell. This slide highlights three principal differences between the meat factory cell and conventional lines. In the cell, we do both slaughter and primal cutting operations in one place while the carcass is still warm, whereas conventional slaughter and cutting is undertaken in separate rooms. In the meat factory cells, the muscles on the outside are removed first and internal organs removed at the end, while the legislation says that organs should be removed as soon as possible. The output of the cell is at present 6 meat cuts plus viscera, while the conventional lines produce typically 2 split and half carcasses plus the separate plucks and bowels. This slide illustrates these differences. The carcasses enter the cell after singeing, and the capacity is obtained from allocation of carcasses to parallel cells. The slaughter and cutting operations are undertaken in one cell for each carcass, and the outputs are, as mentioned, 7 pieces. This is not fully in line with the legislation, which says that pig carcasses may be cut into half carcasses or quarters, and half carcasses into no more than 3 wholesale cuts in slaughterhouses. Further cutting and boning must be carried out in a cutting plant. Now you will see a video from the very first trials with the meat factory cell in Tønsberg in Norway. First, the foreleg is removed, a rather simple operation that should be relatively easy to automate. Here you see the left ham already removed, and the butcher removes the right ham. The hip joint is an anatomically complicated joint, and this operation is probably the most complicated to automate. After the 4 legs have been removed, the truncus is rotated 180 degrees. And then the sides and ribs are sawed laterally to the dorsal muscles. The leading pin keeps viscera away from the saw blade, and that works consistently fine. This operation is assumed easy to automate. The tail, back and head is kept in one piece, the saddle. The saddle is lifted and the viscera loosened by cutting through the mesentries. And you can see that the kidney could either be left on the truncus or go with the viscera. The trachea and esophagus is nicely exposed and can easily be cut. We have also shown that the tongue, larynx with the tonsils can be removed together with trachea and the rest of the viscera. And here it goes, everything, including the flare fat. The hygiene was tested by swabbing of cuts from the proof of concept meat factory cell and compared with carcasses processed on the conventional line. These pig carcasses were the first ever processed in prototype meat factory cell, so it was not at all optimized. The carcasses and the cuts were, for instance, carried, lifted and manipulated manually, as you could see on the video. The warm cuts were swabbed following removal from the carcasses, and the warm carcasses are expected to produce higher number of E. coli than cold carcasses. But as you can see in the table, the preliminary results were very good, both for the meat factory cell and conventionally processed carcasses. Here you see pictures from different stages of evisceration in the meat factory cell, and you can see to the right that the entire set of organs can be hung after the laryngeal head. Regarding evisceration, the legislation says measures must be taken to prevent the spillage of the digestive tract content during and after evisceration, and to ensure that evisceration is completed as soon as possible after stunning. Why is this? Time from stunning to evisceration. Well, it causes gas production, and yes, you could imagine that the bacteria would grow through the intestines. But no, that's not the problem here. No, the effective operational time of the process may take 8 to 12 minutes. So again, this is not a problem. It could be because it's easier. No, and if it was, it's not the competent authority's business. Other reasons? Well, I don't know. But I think it is simply reflecting a mental model of how things are. The trouble is that it doesn't need to be like that in the future. So what we wish for is a innovation-friendly legislation, and luckily the intention is already there. I think a basic common starting point is always needed. The legislation today is the natural common ground, but keep in mind that interpretation and compliance to the legislation varies between countries, regions, and abattoirs. We do not want descriptions of how the company shall obtain safe meat, but which objective targets the food business operators are supposed to achieve, like, for instance, the microbiological criteria that we already have, objective criteria for visual contamination, time from stunning to evisceration, and maybe meat inspection performances. Do we really dare to introduce key performance indicators for the meat inspection? Thanks to all the institutions and companies that has been involved. Thank you for your attention.